the idea that looking at the soil not in a new way, but in a very, very old way. Going back and trying doing things just the same as our great-grandfathers did. Maybe my grandfather, your great-grandfathers. The idea being that they had to farm in a totally different way. If you think about how they did things, there were smaller farms, everything was rotational. They might have 125 acres max, but maybe they only had 20 acres of corn, 20 acres of wheat, the balance was in pasture. It was a constant rotation. They were constantly rebuilding the ground. And part of that was because they didn't have the chemical fertilizers. So they had to make do with what they had. And at the time, that sounded like a hard way to do it. But as we look back at it now, it was the very best way to do it. They didn't contaminate the soil. They took advantage of what they had. They increased the biological activity. They didn't know it, but that's what they were doing because they were providing the environment that the biology could grow. All we're trying to do is create those same circumstances in the field today because we found that without the soil, nothing happens. Now that sounds somewhat simplistic, but it's not. Because when I say without the soil, I mean without the soil being in exactly the right condition. Nutrients are the least of the problems. The real issues with soil are creating the biology to allow the plant to grow naturally on its own. Any plant that grows outside gets approximately 80% of its total nutrients from the air. So we're all covered up with this thing of putting more nutrients to conventional agriculture, and we were there. We did that for years. I was educated at Ohio State, and they told me that there was not a problem existed that a chemical wouldn't cure. Well, we kind of take the opposite approach. We think the soil cures most of the problems. And the idea that you can create that in a natural environment, and it happens to improve the flavor, it happens to improve the nutrition. One of the key things we looked at when we started this 20 years ago, or down this path, there was some research done by USDA that took a sample of vegetables in 1947. There were 40 different vegetables, and they took a random sample of these out of a grocery store. Then they did that almost every year, but the last year they did it was 1997. The nutrient content of those vegetables, same group of vegetables, same random selection, was 40% less in 1997 than it was at the first test. That directly correlates with the increase in chemical usage and the decrease in the nutritive quality. We've been able to turn that around. Our veggies right now are better than they were in 1947. We think that's a tremendous achievement.